adventure, you will be confronted.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
Oh, welcome to the Hundredth Monkey Radio with just Tom tonight. Ramon's actually had a visitor from the States visit him there in Japan, and he's doing an airport run this evening. So we are solo tonight. It is, oh, wow, March 1st already. Oh, my God, this time thing is just really blowing me away here in the last year. I mean, it just seems like 2013 never really happened. I don't know. Things have been just flying by like something else. I know I talked a couple of times on, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show or not, but I know I did on the other show. I actually had a relative here last week who passed away. And I just want to share a short story about this, some amazing grace that happened there. This is my sister's husband, and he was diagnosed in November with stage 4 lung cancer. And this guy, up until the day he was diagnosed, he started feeling sick just a couple of days before the diagnosis. And guy was absolutely amazing man to start with, but the pace and the speed that all this happened is just absolutely, when I sit back and look at this stuff, just absolutely fascinates me, and how quickly this whole process went, and how much grace was involved. The day that he died on last Thursday, there were just about everybody in the family had a sense, somehow or another had a sense that was the day. About an hour before it happened, I had a bug in my ear. I was at work, and I got a little bug in my ear, and I had to call up there and check on everything and see how everything was going. And that was like an hour before he'd passed. But all the immediate family, there's 2 sons and the wife. They also knew that it was getting ready to happen. And for one reason or another, they all felt like they needed to go into the room just before it happened. And all 3 of them went in there, and they all 3 had their hands laying on him when he actually took his last breath. So that in itself, having all 3 of them there and in contact with him when we transitioned, man, what an amazing piece of grace that was. And all 3 of them reported feeling a great sense of release. So, you know, I'm bringing this out here because on this show, Ramona and I have talked a lot about what happens after we do die or we make a transition into something else. And this is actually, you know, I've known people who have died before, et cetera, but this is the closest I personally have ever been to it. And it's been an actual pretty amazing experience for everybody involved. And it just deepens my sense of knowing of that this is just a transitory experience that we're having here, and that we do continue to exist. I mean, when I got up there, I walked into the room, and I mean, I could smell him, I could feel him, I could feel his energy, and I could feel the relief that he was experiencing. I mean, I walked in there, and you know, you would think, oh, the guy died, somebody's died, you know, I should be in sorrow, and you know, the classic picture in sorrow and tears and woe is me and all this stuff. But I couldn't wipe this big ass grin off my face. I mean, I was smiling ear to ear, and it was just an amazing experience. So, anyways, I just felt I had to share that with you guys. I had to get it out there just to get it out there. Anyways, I want to shout out to all you guys out in the chat room and all our other listeners out there. Namaste, my friends. I have got a great show for you tonight. We are going to be talking with Ed Komarek tonight. Ed, he's been on the show before. He's a researcher who is doing some pretty amazing work out there in raising that level of consciousness and kind of doing some of that discernment work for us that we have to do for ourselves also. But he's doing some amazing work out there. And since we've had him on the show already, I won't go through the long bio, and we'll let him touch a little bit on that before we get rolling. And welcome back to the 100th Monkey, Ed Komarek.
Good evening, Tom. Good to be with you.
Oh, so how's things? You're down in the Gulf Coast tonight.
Yeah, I've got a friend, Jack Rudlow. He's kind of one of the last marine ecologists still of the founders of marine ecology that's still alive, and he's an author and he writes environmental books. And we've got a bonfire here right next to the ocean on Dickerson Bay, and so you might be a little background sound of picking a little bit of partying going on in the background and whatever. And they're cooking up shrimp for the evening and some clams.
That sounds like a hell of a lot of fun, actually.
It's a beautiful day down here. We had in the low 70s today and clear, and tomorrow is going to be up in the 80s, and so the weather is just really nice today. Even the bugs are coming out a little bit.
And I'm happy when I get into the 40s. So Ed, for our listeners out there who may not have heard any of your other shows or not familiar with you yet, can you share a little bit with our audience who you are and where you're from and what brought you into this field?
Okay, I was born and raised in the Deep South, just north of Tallahassee, Florida, just across the line in Georgia. I was born to a family of ecologists, which I found out later in life when I got into the UFO field has really helped me a lot to understand extraterrestrial contact and the interactions going on between extraterrestrial races and ourselves, because that's a lot like ecology. Ecology, you study that, you categorize and study the animals, collect the animals, and then you begin to understand how these animals interact with each other, and so they're in relationships with each other, and that's what ecology is all about. And Herb Stoddard was one of the founders of ecology, and he was a next-door neighbor, and my dad was really like one of the founders of fire ecology. And so I grew up in this environment, ecological environment, without any contact on anything, strange or unusual having to do with the paranormal, until I went to Alaska in 1967 at 17 years old, and in a cold winter night, or a cold winter day, after playing some pool with friends down in Fairbanks, Alaska, I must have gone out to get a little fresh air and found this little metaphysical bookstore tucked away on a back street, and opened the door to the smell of incense and good music and books on UFOs, out-of-body experiences, reincarnation, tarot, all this, and I just felt right at home. And it began to put me through an existential crisis, because it was really so different than everything I'd been led to believe up to that point in my life. And then I started concentrating over the years on UFOs and extraterrestrial contact, and then we founded the field of exopolitics about 12, 13 years ago, which is basically once you understand that we're being visited by many different types of extraterrestrials that come from many different planetary systems and whatever, then you begin to wonder about what are the relationships with each other, how they get along with each other, how are they interacting with us. And so that's kind of what exopolitics is about. And so I put that together and wrote a book of my knowledge that I've gained for the last 40 years in study of extraterrestrial contact into the book UFOs, Exopolitics, and the New World Disorder. And through that book, I hope to reach as many people as I can to give them a general understanding of what I've learned in this life, because I built my life on the good works of others. As a young man, I read hundreds and maybe even thousands of books that other people had written, and this progressed me much further than I normally would if I'd had to try to figure things out on my own. Right. And so, yeah, so that's basically a little bit about me and a little bit about what exopolitics is, and we can, talk about in that area, whatever, I just am finishing up the rough draft on a book on fire ecology, and hopefully I'll have that out by the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. And fire ecology is a whole nother different subject.
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, I kind of wanted to dig into some of the old sightings and some of the motivations around society at the time, and what pushed us in the direction in the all the secrecy that we've got right now. I mean, when I look back at some of the sightings that were happening in the 40s, the late 40s, early 50s, it seems to me when I just look at some of the evidence that's out there that a lot of these craft, or even back into the World War II Foo Fighters stuff, the Foo Fighters, they seemed curious. It to me, it seemed like they were curious about what we were doing, who we were, that sort of thing. And then as we got up into the late 40s, early 50s, there seemed to be another element there. And I don't know if it was just our stupidity that ended up being the factor that took down planes. We lost several aircraft during that period, and supposedly due to UFOs. But what's your opinion there? Was there a couple of elements there?
Yeah, two significant things happened at the end of World War II. We exploded the atomic bomb, and that made a pretty big bang, and that got the extraterrestrials' attention. They've been here all along, but they haven't really been focusing on this planet all that much. We're kind of out of the way, kind of on the edges of the solar system, apparently. And what happened was we exploded that atomic bomb, and then we also started moving into space with Sputnik. And we started doing a lot of testing out at White Sands Missile Range and other areas, and started to be a lot of sightings out there. In fact, the crash at Roswell was really close to the only atomic bomb wing at the time was stationed at Roswell, New Mexico.
Right.
And so they started after that they started monitoring us much more intensely, and that's why it really got in the late 40s and early 50s. It became national news, even in Time magazine. At that time the military was debunking it, but there was still a lot of open interest in the subject. But they've always been here. There's cases that go all the way back into Egypt, into the time of Alexander and Romans. They've even recorded instances all the way to the present. But things got really going when we exploded the atomic bomb and started moving out into space, because then the extraterrestrials knew that they had to monitor us much closely, and that we could, we were moving into their domain, so to speak, and becoming part of the cosmic neighborhood. And so apparently they met with President Eisenhower. There was maybe 3 meetings. There's been quite a bit of that discussion on the internet. Michael Sala's written some articles on that. Gerald Light was at one of those meetings. He was a theologian that was invited to a hangar in which Eisenhower and his generals and quite a few people were there for a couple of days in that hangar with the Nordic type of extraterrestrials. And so there were early meetings, and apparently we were the Nordic types of extraterrestrials wanted to develop a better relationship with us, but in order to do that, they had certain conditions, and that was that we had to start demilitarizing, especially cut back on our atomic testing and everything. And Eisenhower, really didn't want to disarm because he thought maybe it could be a trick or something. And then they also warned about the Greys, another type of extraterrestrial race. And apparently, what happened was naturally, instead of developing a liaison with the more advanced, more ethical types, we ended up cutting deals with the Greys, and then all the secrecy really started coming down very rapidly in the 1950s. And another significant thing happened was as that after the World War II, the Nazis were defeated, but they moved a lot of the Nazis into the CIA. In fact, the whole Russian intelligence unit under Operation Paperclip was brought into the CIA, and so the global elite, the people that are connected with Bilderberger was formed, I think, in 1953 or 54. But in 1947, the global elite, had their sons and daughters were all in the intelligence community and everything, so they knew right off the bat that extraterrestrial life was real. It was here, and they immediately realized it was a threat to their social order and the control they had over humanity and their corporations. And they realized that the technology on a science saucer, for example, could be that the power plants on it could be used to fuel society with non-polluting, almost free energy, and that would completely wipe out the fossil fuels industry.
Right.
Standard Oil, Exxon, Mobil, all the big oil corporations and everything. It would almost wipe out the power plants. It would the electrogravitic technology of how they fly these craft. There go your roads and bridges and all the cement companies and everything that's all associated with that. So they set about instigating this cover-up through the governments that they control and through the intelligence community in order to protect their special interests, in order to exploit this technology and bring it into society and make trillions of dollars, and also to suppress the technology where it would send their industries the way that the gaslight companies went when the electric light bulb was invented. The electric light bulb was just invented. It was never really put into use right to begin with, and the stock of the gaslight companies went from $100 a share down to a dollar a share, and they were still making money. So they set about protecting their interest at the expense of the rest of us in society. And so you can see what's happening because of that. We have this over-reliance on fossil fuels that's causing incredible destruction to the environment. And J.P. Morgan himself, bankrupted Tesla because J.P. Morgan said that if I can't put a meter on it, I don't want it.
Right.
And so he ran right up against these special interests that were subtly behind and had a large amount of control of society. And I worked through this book. In my book, I worked through this and who's involved. And these early companies like General Electric, they were involved in bringing not only Nazi rocket scientists over here, but also scientists that were skilled in electrogravitic, because apparently the Germans test flew a flying saucer in 1938. But the problem is they didn't do them much good, because they didn't have the compact power plant at the time that could run the capacitors of the craft, so they could charge the craft up from the outside. It'd fly up in the air, but it was going to come back down relatively quickly.
Right.
And it wasn't until the Americans be able to fit a small nuclear power plant into a flying saucer in 1959, according to senior scientist Boyd Bushman, who worked for Lockheed at the time. And also Bill Uhouse worked on flight simulators in the early 1960s, claiming, along with an extraterrestrial, a gray type of extraterrestrial, so that pilots could get used to flying these craft and whatever. And so I don't just talk off the cuff in this book. All through the book, I give my sources. Like there's 169 sources that I felt were credible whistleblower testimonies, as well as actual contact cases where people have actually met the extraterrestrials face to face.
Right. Going back to the 40s, it seems like it was we were approaching it in a pretty healthy manner. I mean, it was above the table for the most part, and people were truly looking into it without agendas. And then, like you said, the Roswell thing happened. Do you think the Roswell thing was a big catalyst for the doors being shut?
Well, apparently they already they got a crash in 1942 that was talked about by whistleblowers that ended up, some of the debris was in the basement of the White House, and that was in 42. But that was right in the middle of the war. They weren't in any position to make use of that technology, and so they were just concentrating on the war effort. And so it wasn't until after the war, and when Roswell happened, and maybe even might have been even another crash or two at that time, then they were able to focus their attention on it. In fact, they were quite afraid that maybe this was Russian technology or something, that Russians had somehow got this kind of tech. The Cold War was already beginning, and they were afraid that the Russians had this kind of technology, so it scared them really bad. And then they realized it was extraterrestrial. And then soon after that, in the early 50s, extraterrestrials began to meet with the authorities, particularly in the United States, because right. we were becoming the superior technological power by then. Coming out of World War II, Britain was pretty devastated, as well as most of Europe and Japan.
Yeah, I've also wondered how much influence the whole Cold War thing had on the doors being shut too. I mean, there was a lot of hype and hysteria about the commies, right? In that time frame, and there was a lot of people worrying and wondering if these strange lights in the sky were the commies' secret weapon type thing. There's a lot of fear and paranoia, and so the first thing the military does, when something happens and they don't understand, is slap down the secrecy on it, because they can always lift the secrecy later. And so that was initial reaction of the military, was to shut it all down until they figured out what the hell was going on. But then what happened was the economic interests got involved, the reverse engineering of the technologies, and also the protection of the established interests of that period. And if it had been up to the military, probably would have opened things back up fairly rapidly. But the special interests, the people that were making began to make trillions of dollars on this technology, like reverse engineering it into the public sector and into defense. That's described by Colonel Corso in The Day After Roswell. He worked for General Turbo, and they had access to a little bit of the technology, and he explains how this technology was secretly incorporated as foreign technology into our research and development organizations. And so this is basically what was happening, and we had to they came in, the special interests came in, and sort of subverted the whole process and took control of it. The focus solely with Bilderberg, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. Rockefellers were big into oil. They're all into the money. What would happen to them? If all of a sudden, there was right, our cars flew without gas.
Yeah, and also that we could operate without money, and because money is a powerful mechanism of control, and so it's just the money just acts like the old slave owner. If you didn't do what you were told, you'd be beaten, or you wouldn't be fed. And so same thing is, if you don't cooperate, you don't get any money, you don't get any funding for your research. And so the scientists and the research people don't want to touch this subject on the 10-foot pole, because they're easy to control with money. They lose their funding and their grants from the NSF and whatever. And so the whole situation got subverted by geopolitics that operates beneath this sort of thin veneer of democracy that we have. We like to think we live in democracy and that we're democratic, but the people with the money who are really essentially in control of our country and other countries in the Western world as well.
Right.
And the other problem is that we saw that, some of these extraterrestrials are very advanced and very ethical and spiritual, and you can see what is happening in the Middle East. People in the Middle East and Syria and whatever, through modern technology, realize the rest of the world is are better off than they are, and they want part of that action. so what was going to happen with the people if the people understood that extraterrestrials were here and they were so much more advanced and that they could live so much better like the extraterrestrials were living? They wouldn't have any use for the elites. They wouldn't have any use for the Assads or the Gaddafis or for the Saddam Husseins or, for the Rockefellers or, for the privileged class.
Right.
And so it scared the hell out of the elite people that exerted a tremendous amount of control over the affairs on this planet.
Right. And then we add in, we had some pretty solid reports on Eisenhower's visit with the tall whites, but then now we throw in the Greys into the mix here, a less benevolent species, I would say.
You don't want to get the tall whites confused with the Nordics. The Nordics were
okay.
Yeah. Now the tall whites were also involved, but they were kind of they had their base at Nellis Air Force Base up in the mountains there at Nellis, and apparently, according to Charles Hall, the Greys also had a base in that area, and so they actually, when they put Nellis together in the 1950s, they incorporated put that base around those extraterrestrial bases. And the tall whites began, according to Charles Hall, began to start interacting with us in the early 60s as well. But the Nordics, apparently, the first meeting was with the Nordics, then with the Greys, and then with the tall whites, I think.
So Eisenhower met with all three different species then.
Well, I'm not sure if he actually met with the tall whites. Apparently, that things were pretty touch and go with the tall whites, according to Charles Hall. People were getting killed, and they out there in that remote area around that base, military people and whatever, and the tall whites didn't really think very much of us. They basically saw us as a little better than animals, and they were particularly upset about the way we treated our children because our children are the future.
Hey, Ed, I got to cut you off. We're at our first break here. We'll pick up with the tall whites some more right when we come back. You're listening to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon, and we have Ed Komarek with us. Be right back.
On your way through this hard venture, you will be confronted.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Now one more time before I go, one last thing you need to know, my friends. You want to keep it complicated, it's really all quite simple in the end. You got to tune into your inner being, now let it be. You got to activate.
Welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio. We are speaking with Ed Komarek tonight, and before the break, Ed, we were talking about the tall whites, and I guess the confusion that I have on that is I continually, whenever somebody would say Nordics or tall whites, I always equated them as the same race.
That's the problem. Geopolitics is complicated enough, or international politics is complicated enough. Well, what you learn is that the laws of physics extend to the rest of the universe, and the laws of chemistry extend to the rest of the universe, and so do the laws of ecology and politics. And so what we're looking at here is something that's immensely more complicated than what we even have here on our own planet amongst our own selves. And so as far as the latest I've heard is the government knows of perhaps 120 different extraterrestrial races that have been here or interacted with us, but that's give or take depending how you categorize it. Right. So there's some that have been here are quite active here, and there's some that are not. And they all interact with each other in different ways, and so the interactions can become violent, and they fight wars just like we fight wars sometimes. And I did a whole chapter of my book on cases going all the way back to the Vedas and to the Bible of extraterrestrial contact and wars being fought with humans being used as proxies between these fighting factions. all the way up to the present day of saucers firing lasers at each other, and some of them even crashing down to Earth and whatever, like one that happened in British Columbia, and also it's another one that happened in Russia.
Right.
So there are a lot of cases of actual extraterrestrials fighting amongst themselves. There's cases of extraterrestrials cooperating and working together amongst themselves. Charles Hall himself says that the Greys and the Tall Whites do not get along, and if the Greys got anywhere close to the Tall Whites' children, they would kill them without even thinking twice about it.
Wow.
And so the reason I take the Tall Whites very seriously, it's not just Charles Hall and the several books that he's written. He's given some of the most detailed information we have on a culture of an extraterrestrial race. And the reason I take him so seriously is that there's other people that have seen these Tall Whites, both under sort of slightly disguised in Las Vegas and out in the western United States, and also out in the desert. And I got so interested, I myself went out there, went to the Spring Mountains, where they tend to hang out in the heat of the summer after the tourists go back into their camps and whatever, and usually at night. And I found more cases in Indian Springs my own self. And so I'm quite confident that Charles Hall is telling the truth, and so I'm willing to go out on a limb with him, whereas a lot of this channel information, I'm afraid a lot of that information, it's basically people channeling their own subconscious, unless the people actually are having sightings around them and that the physical craft are interacting with other people around them. Then I would take telepathic communications more seriously, but it's just so easy to end up channeling your own subconscious.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount going on out there like that. But when you talked about UFOs fighting in our history, the one that popped into mind was the Alexander the Great when he was on his way into India. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, well, in that case, I think that the Alexander Gate was about to have a battle across a river or something,
right.
And 3 discs flew over the battle, and everything kind of stopped.
Right. Yeah. So maybe the discs were, or they were protecting India from an invasion.
Well, what happened in India apparently is it's the same thing that there's recorded in the Bible and also in Samaria. It was with a group of extraterrestrials that are human types that were called the Anunnaki, and the Sumerians called them Anunnaki, and they're also involved with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you remember in the Bible, it even discusses, Abraham's by his tent, and these 3 men walk up amongst these trees, and he goes out to meet them, and he knows they're not ordinary people, and he asked how he could serve them. He actually went and got them some food, and then 2 of them went down to Sodom and Gomorrah and met with Lot and took Lot and his family out of Sodom and Gomorrah before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by fire and brimstone, which is fairly similar to atomic warfare.
Right.
And this actually goes back to the Vedas, and the Vedas describe this all in detail, fighting between Krishna and these different Anunnaki, fighting amongst themselves and shooting each other's down with these super weapons and whatever, lasers and sonic weapons and stuff like that. I mean, if you read the Vedas, it's just amazing. It's just so detailed.
Right. Some of the descriptions in there, the flesh melting off the elephant's bones and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, that sounds nuclear to me.
Hair falling out.
Right.
People being turned to ash. That's a little bit like Lot's wife who hindered and whatever turned into a pillar of salt. Well, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, directly under where the bomb struck, it just vaporized people, and they just were this little pile of ash.
Right.
And so even now, there's been excavations in India, and there's some sites that are the bones of the people that are buried there were all contorted forms and whatever bones are still highly radioactive, and also there's like glass where the sand has been melted over miles and miles out in the deserts of Africa and places and whatever. So apparently about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, before recorded history, there was a warfare going on between factions of the Anunnaki at the time, as recorded both by the Sumerians, by the in the Hindu Vedas, and then even that got into the Bible. And like it says in the Bible, have no other gods before me.
Right.
It's like so people worshiping other gods, and other gods were backing other proxy groups that were fighting with the Israelis. And so, and the people at that time, they didn't know what, they didn't know better. They just accepted all these magical powers and everything, that these people were gods, when in fact they were just extraterrestrials, and some of them were not that nice of extraterrestrials, like the god Jehovah, which was pretty fierce dude, and put Lot through put Jacob through all kinds of stuff. Got into a wager with the devil, with Satan, and everything else, and put this guy's life on the line, and whatever. So, and you realize that the God in the Bible walks and talks and speaks and is described in detail, as far as their looks and everything. And so you begin to realize that ancient peoples were dealing with something that was so far beyond them that the only way they could conceive of it is that these people were gods or demons, depending on how they were treated by them. And so it's all through our history, even our genetics. Even talk in the Bible, it talks about Adam. Well, Adam really, I think, means the first genetically engineered human, because if you remember when Cain killed Abel, Cain went out and married outside of the Garden of Eden. There were people living outside of the Garden of Eden, and so basically it looks like what was being described was there was some genetic modifications of the existing peoples were made, in which Adam and Eve were the first, or Adam was the first. And so all this, you put all these little pieces together, and recorded history, plus what we know now and the cases that we're involved in now and whatever, you begin to see this picture that we live in a universe that's vast, and that other top predators, just like ourselves, evolve on planets, and then they learn how to cross the distances between the stars. At one time, people thought it was impossible to cross the oceans, that the ocean just dropped off.
Right.
Well, at Columbus, you really realized that you could cross the oceans if you had advanced enough technology. And so but did that make the Europeans any better people than the natives that they conquered or colonized? And so it's a big universe out there, and if once you realize that the universe is really holographic, that if it's happening here, it's happening elsewhere as well. And so in nature, you have both cooperation and competition, and between those two, animals and creatures evolve here on Earth. Well, it's the same thing that's happening on these other planetary systems and whatever. And then they don't necessarily get along. Once they bump into each other, there's bound to be conflicts. Conflict over resources, conflicts, over planetary systems, and so we're kind of protected, under a sort of benign protection. Our situation is kind of similar to, say, a small European country or a small country in South America surrounded by superpowers. No superpower can just waltz in there and overtly take over that country, because it'll be stopped and subverted by another superpower. And so there's kind of a stasis here of kind of leaving us alone to a certain degree. Let us evolve and decide for ourselves which way we want to go. Do we want to become, a New World Order, Orwellian police state, or do we want to become live in a world where all resources are free and information is free and can be accessed by anybody? And that that everybody cares and loves and has compassion for each other. So we're basically giving a choice, just like a small country is given a choice which way they want to go. But if there's a lot of destabilization within the country, like we have in the Ukraine right now, then the superpowers do get involved, and they start pushing back and forth, and the Ukraine gets caught in the middle, or like in Syria, where you have areas where the European Union and the Western oligarchs are getting into conflict with the Eastern oligarchs, and people get caught up into these proxy wars between these elite powers, And the same thing is just happening on a much faster scale, and that's why, the United States operates, and the Soviet Union both have operated covert operations in other countries, subverting each other and subverting other countries, and that's why a lot of the ET activity is covert, is because one group just can't overtly come in and take us over, because they would be subverted by another group.
Right.
And so you end up with this kind of Cold War kind of situation.
The big stalemate up there.
Yeah, like a stalemate, but in a way that's good for us, because it gives us some free will. Otherwise, we could be taken over by somebody, and we would lose our free will and our independence. So in a way, it's good. So there's at least in our region here, there seems to be some kind of stasis going on between some kind of balance between all these different extraterrestrial powers, where no one power can make a move without it being countered by another. So there's some kind of arrangement or agreement to slowly let us know about the rest of the extraterrestrial community, and that's why the craft are coming closer and closer and allow pictures to be taken of them more and more. But then we trash it ourselves, because we have viral marketers, that want to make money and that want hits on their site, so they fake all these pictures and all this stuff. And so how do you know what's real and what's not? Well, it's kind of like, how do you know the difference between a counterfeit dollar and a real dollar? Well, you really got to be an expert, and even an expert can be fooled sometimes. And so that's what I've tried to do, is tried to pull all this together in the book and the knowledge of my 40 years in this field, and take the best whistleblower testimonies and the best contact cases and put them together in a step-by-step process to give an overall picture of an extremely complex subject that's even more complex than our Earth politics or geopolitics.
Yeah, I look at groups like Stephen Greer, who feels that everything out there is benevolent, and they're just so spiritually advanced, and just the greatest things in the universe, and the only reason that they're able to be out there is because they've reached that level of advancement. I definitely disagree with that. I think that I think you kind of lined out there, each and every civilization has the opportunity to evolve technologically and spiritually, and it's all that whole free will factor kicks in. Right?
And each individual, right now there's some places that you wouldn't go, or you won't get into a car with some people, because better, and whatever, and and other people that you do. So it's just like people, there's predators. There's a lot of predators on this planet that prey on other people, and there's a lot of victims that are preyed on by human predators. And so, and just like in nature, you have it's all predator and prey. Even the plants are competing for resources, competing for sunlight, competing for water, shading out the other plants. Burning out the competition. Like pines, pines have very resinous needles, so they burn out trees that can't take fire so well. So that's why they grow in high fire environments. So there's all this competition going on in nature. That's the way nature operates, and it just doesn't stop when we move out in space. And so you have to look at people's backgrounds. The problem with Stephen Greer and Joseph Burks and whatever, they're doctors. They try to take a positive attitude towards life and keeping people alive and stuff. And I've told them, and I feel like they're afraid, to think about the universe as being fearful enough, not knowing what's out there, or the unknown, but it's even more fearful when you realize there's really predators that are much more advanced and even more predators than we ourselves are. And so there's the fear factor comes in, and so there's a tendency to try to get into denial and deny all this evidence to the contrary, where people are being abused by aliens or being abducted and abused, and it just can't be written off as our own military operations, covert operations are written off. This is all fantasies by people. Some of it is. But there's just so many abductee cases and whatever, and they describe a lot of the same procedures, the genetic engineering that's being done on us and all this sort of thing against our will. So you just can't ignore all that and just say it's just the military or these people's fantasies and whatever. So from all the evidence that I'm seeing, I say there's a broad range of advanced races. Some are just a little more technologically advanced than we are, so it looks like they're a lot more advanced than they really are, like the Greys. and they're quite very autocratic. And basically, like Charles Hall said, you don't say no to a gray. You know, they just do what they want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas other races take human free will into consideration, and they don't take anybody on board. You know, they ask, and if the person wants to be taken on board, then they will bring them on board. Otherwise, they will leave them alone. So they respect free will. So it's just like in our own society. I like to hang around people that respect my free will.
Right.
And I don't like to hang around people that are predators, that are going to prey on me or take advantage of me. And so we've got to learn as a society and as a humanity to align ourselves with the more advanced races of beings that are coming here and not get involved with these other types like we have, unfortunately, with the Greys, where we sold the abductees down the river, just like the Africans sold their own people to the white slavers for metal pots and pans and iron for their spears.
Right.
So essentially, the same thing has happened to some of our people. But like I say, it's very, very it's a very, very complex situation, and people are just being kept out of the loop for just reasons of power and control, not because people will freak out or not because they will panic, or freak out or anything, but just basically gets down to power and money, just like everything else in this society.
Have you heard or anything from competent or something that you have a higher level of confidence in about a sort of an end game to all this crap going on? Is there? I mean, people talk about disclosure. Yeah, disclosure's coming. It's going to happen. I don't know how many times there's been dates thrown out there that have passed by into history. But have you heard anything out there from anybody that you would put some level of confidence in of some sort of a plan that's in place for bringing this stuff out on the table?
Well, they have set these plans into motion, but they get subverted by the global elite, because the global elite are going to drag their feet as long as possible because you're getting at their meal ticket, and one of the mechanisms of their control over the rest of us in this society. So that's really the problem. So we're not going to get any disclosures and open disclosures from government or whatever until they're absolutely being forced to do so. But there are these programs where they're allowing some people to talk. Now it used to be that even people couldn't even talk about it. They couldn't, of course, show the classified documents or anything. But now they're beginning to allow some of these people in government that have had contact with extraterrestrials to talk that are credible, like Bill Uhouse, who worked at Area 51 and worked with the extraterrestrial on flight simulators. He said the flight simulators were set up, they could charge the capacitors and use the simulator for about 15 or 20 minutes, and their capacitors would burn out, and they would have to rebuild their capacitors and whatever, but it was long enough for them to learn how to begin to fly the saucers that senior scientist Bushman, who's been allowed to talk, he actually showed the schemata in one of the interviews. The links are in my book to the saucer that they were able to test fly in 1959, and so it's coming out, and gradually, but the elite, and the privileged class wants to drag it out as long as possible, because they understand what this is eventually going to do to their control over society, and they're trying to get a handle on it and be able to maintain their control over the society even when we are fully aware of the extraterrestrial presence.
Right. Well, I think it all boils back down into the technology, right? I mean, what that technology can mean for humanity.
Yeah, power and money, whether that technology is going to be used for the benefit of humanity or whether it's going to be used to destroy humanity. Now, there's a neat little book from a guy down in South America called Amy, Child of the Stars, I think. And it whether it's real or not, it makes some very interesting suggestions. But basically what Amy was telling this other kid about the way they operated was that you can rent out a spaceship just like we rent out a book, not even rent it, but you can borrow a spaceship just like we borrow a book from a library. and the spaceship is hooked up to other through quantum computers and everything, so it essentially flies itself wherever you want to go. You just put in the coordinates where you want to go, and it flies you there, and it keeps you from flying into the ground or anything like that. You know, we're developing these technologies for cars and stuff and whatnot. But what he said was very interesting. He says is there's a kind of a natural mechanism. The reason they don't really want to help us, the more advanced ones really don't want to help us that much, because there's a sort of a natural thing here is if there's not enough love is kind of a cohesion that holds the society, holds people together, and if there's not enough love within that society will fall back in on itself and collapse, and we start back over from the Stone Age again. And so this protects more ethically advanced societies from more predatory societies until those predatory societies build enough level of love within their society to become part, be able to interact with them in a more peaceful, harmonious manner.
Yeah, that makes you know, the shadow boxing that goes on from that elite group, you know, all the fear and discontent that's thrown out over the airwaves, the television, the media, you know, all the major media sources are constantly barraging humanity with you know, pain and suffering and fear, and that makes so much more sense why that card is being played.
Yeah. Well, see, so the ethical types don't involve themselves in that, but now the unethical types are a lot like ourselves, like the Greys, who are quite autocratic, that don't respect our freedoms and liberties, that think of us more or less as property. You know, they don't, and they don't mind giving us technologies that'll destroy themselves if it benefits them. It benefits their ability to get control over this planet. And we've been doing a pretty good job of letting the Greys get control over this planet because of our lower level of consciousness. But eventually it's going to boil down to, you know, how are we going to extricate ourselves from being involved with these gray types of extraterrestrials? Just like when you get involved in a relationship with somebody that turns out to be bad, it's not near as easy to get out of it as it was to get into it.
Right.
And so that's where the rubber's really going to hit the road here pretty soon. As these gray extraterrestrials have got pretty darn entrenched in our society in these classified programs and are protected, you know, by our government and whatever, and are interacting with the elite and promising the elite that basically the elite will be able to continue to run things as they have run things, only that the extraterrestrials would be the overlords in that term. But the thing is they can't be trusted. They lie and they deceive just like our global elites do. And so, and they also manipulate and they pressure the global elites, and they use the carrot and stick on the global elites just like the elite uses the carrot and stick on the rest of us.
Right.
And it's just you don't want to get involved with people like this. You don't want to get involved with extraterrestrials like this. And so, but how can you even explain this to people where some people don't even know if it's just lights in the skies or it's Chinese lanterns or something? If they're kept so confused, by the time people realize what's going on, we could be taken over by these gray type extraterrestrials and become part of their civilization, and that's not, and that would be disaster. That'd be just about as bad as destroying ourselves, being enslaved by another extraterrestrial race.
It definitely would. Hey, Ed, we're coming up on our second break here. Would you share for our audience the website where they can pick up your book at?
Okay, the best thing, my book is free, and they can also buy it in paperback or buy it on Kindle, but it's actually free on its website. Probably the best, simplest way is you can just type in the word exopolitics, and then you can just go down and you'll see Exopolitics, a comprehensive briefing, and that's my blog. It's exopolitics.blogspot.com/. And it has a book link on there, as well as the Extraterrestrial Cultural Center link to the webpage of our Extraterrestrial Cultural Center, which takes the concepts in this book. And the Extraterrestrial Cultural Center concept is under etculturalcenter.weebly.com.
Okay, we'll have links for that here on the description for the show page also.
Okay, good. Okay.
All right, well, we are going into the second hour. I'm going to be opening up the phone lines. It's 1-866-37-TRUTH. We'll see you after the break.
on Facebook.
Broadcasting worldwide in complete defiance of the U.S. Patriot Act and the NDAA.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
Oh, welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We are talking with Ed Komarek. And so, Ed, you mentioned something about love in that last segment, towards the end of the last segment. I mean, how much of a factor does that really play into our advancement? I mean, I have a deep sense myself that there is a huge spiritual card that's being played here, and when we start talking spiritual, love is the foundation for that. Is that an essential aspect of our evolution?
Yes, very much so. That's what it describes in this little contact book that I was just discussing, or whatever. Is that they say they actually have like the technology can measure the level of love in a person. And not only that, they can measure the level of love in groups or of our whole society as a whole. And with that level of love gets up to a certain point, it moves us kind of up to the next level. But if it doesn't, we bump up against that. Then the amount of hate and discord within society tears us back down, and our society collapses back down again. It's like the phoenix, we're born from the ashes.
Right.
And so we've really got to get, if we can get that level of love, of that higher consciousness up to a certain level, then we'll be able to interact with these more advanced extraterrestrials and join their societies and be a much more happier, harmonious, peaceful people. But if we don't, then we're liable to fall back into chaos, and we're either going to completely collapse or be taken over by another and colonized by a less ethical extraterrestrial race. So it's really imperative that we get our level of love up, that we have love and compassion for each other, and that we can't fool these extraterrestrials, these advanced extraterrestrials, because they take technology, like I say, that they can measure. They know exactly where we're coming from, each individual. And also what they're saying is that it's programmed into their supercomputers who they are going to show themselves to and who they're not going to show themselves to. And so a lot of these sightings that people have, even at distance or up close, are all being choreographed by the more advanced extraterrestrials, depending on the need and the attempt to try to bring people's consciousness levels up. And so that's where the more advanced extraterrestrials are concentrating on, not on the technology, on giving us technology that we'll just use to hurt ourselves with, but to actually help us with our spiritual development, to get our consciousness up to a point where we can handle the technology that we already have in an ethical and not self-destructive manner.
Yeah, well, so much of the technology we have right now, there's no way to do it in a non-destructive manner. I mean, it just...
Yeah, and that's one of the strategies of the Greys, is to give us this technology and let us do ourselves in, and then we'll be attracted to them and look for them to be our saviors, and then they gain control over this planet, and they've excluded the more ethical races, and we're at the mercy then of them. So it's part of their strategy is to cause as much chaos and discord and within the society, so as to gain control over this of our culture and our society, and that's not in our best interest. Whereas the more ethical types are actually operating in our best interest. But if we turn away from the more ethical types and whatever, because of our hatred and because of our anger and because of our lower consciousness state, then there's nothing they can really do but just let us either collapse or fall under the control of these less ethical or predatory races. So it's a complex thing.
It definitely is, and another card that's in there is that the disembodied aspect of consciousness that interacts with humanity and has for forever. We have those called, and I think there's a fine line there between what in our history is listed as divine interaction that was actually extraterrestrial, and then there's another element there. I feel that there is a divine element that's also involved here.
Yeah. In the last chapter of my book, I get into the really big picture. The extraterrestrial picture of what's going on in this universe is one thing, but then the even larger this universe is, and maybe multi-universes are part of this much greater realities where you get into out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, medium, spirits that don't move on to where they need to move on, so they continue to create chaos in people's minds. So you got and reincarnation. Not only I'm realizing that we have reincarnation, that we reincarnate on this planet, but we reincarnate possibly on other planets as well, and people and beings from other planets are incarnating on this planet. So there's a lot of exchanges going on, incarnation-wise, between planets. And the problem with like the Buddhists and that they're sort of Earth-centric in their thoughts about reincarnation, whereas reincarnation really is a universal thing. Reincarnation is involved throughout the whole universe, and so you have all the exchanges and learning experiences of different peoples as they move from different planetary systems, and and maybe incarnate for a few hundred lifetimes on Earth, and then you may move to maybe a more advanced planet and begin incarnating there. As you vibrate to those higher frequencies, and so in a sense, we're not. I can't even be sure that we're not living in some kind of a simulation. That there was a link that on Facebook. People can contact me, by the way, on Facebook. I reached my 5,000 limit, but they can follow me on Facebook. But they can also join the Extraterrestrial Cultural Center, which is what is really a progression out beyond what my book is about. Is trying to build an infrastructure to interact with the more advanced extraterrestrial races in a friendly, positive, loving manner. And that's what the Extraterrestrial Cultural Center is about. And we hope that within the next 30 years we can build these centers around the world, and in which people will be able to go into the centers and they'll see, the different types of extraterrestrials, paintings and pictures of the different types of extraterrestrials and cases, and help people to begin to understand what this greater universe is, and interact in a more positive, beneficial manner. And so I've been, as soon as I made my book free on the internet, it wasn't but 2 or 3 days later that I heard where one researcher, Wendell Stevens, had a extraterrestrial had brought up the subject of an extraterrestrial cultural center, and that kind of went into my mind. And after a week or two, I came up with this whole concept of extraterrestrial cultural centers. Every little country or town has a cultural center. Well, why not have cultural centers for extraterrestrials, for extraterrestrial, positive interaction with extraterrestrials? I think that's where we're heading. This is eventually going to come out one way or other. How it falls out, nobody knows. The New World Order people may have to become substantially weaker than what they are today, and for it to come out. But I think it's going to happen sooner or later, and then it's going to boil down to who we ally ourselves with, which extraterrestrial we have relations and ally ourselves with. And so I'm thinking for the future. It's way beyond my lifetime. But at least I'm a conceptual person. I'm looking for somebody that will take it from here, from the concept, and put it into reality. But that's kind of where I'm heading with that. And you could just type in Extraterrestrial Cultural Center into your Facebook search engine, and that group will come up, and you can join us there. We have over 2,000 members there in that group already, and we've only had it going for like 6 months.
Yeah, that's I think that's another one of the signs of the times right now is just the creation of that Facebook page and the first steps towards making that a reality. I mean, things are definitely changing here, and I don't know if I can really put my finger on what it was that sparked this resurgence of awareness towards the bigger picture and what's really going on this planet. But it seems to me like right around, well, maybe it was 911 that did it. I don't know. There was some catalyst there that really started turning people's heads towards trying to figure out what the hell was really going on.
Well, the technology is really helping, like the social networks and everything. It's like a nervous system. You know, a nervous system's been created where everybody is in communication with everybody else now through the internet and through Facebook and through social networks. So we don't have to get our information, from the mass media who are propagandizing us. They're telling us what they want us to know rather than what we need to know. And so we have our own news sources now, like on Facebook, through our news feed in areas that we're interested in, and we can't be propagandized so well. But that's the ones of us that are moving, up to this, this higher level. But there's still a lot of the society that's caught up in the chaos and the bloodshed and the killings and the hatred amongst, races and between religions and everything else and whatnot. So there just has got to be enough of us. It doesn't have to be that large percentage, but just a few percentage of people that are aware on top of what's going on and can begin to turn things around for humanity and start moving us in the right direction instead of the road to destruction that we're being led down now. And so it's up to every individual. We all have a vote, and our vote, is how we interact with our fellow citizens, how we treat each other. We're actually voting for our future. How do we treat our children? If we beat and abuse our children, we're destroying our future that we'll be reincarnated into. So it's all about communicating with each other and building awareness and working towards a positive future with as many people as possible. And then these other people that are still trapped in this chaos and confusion and violence and everything else will slowly be able to move too, but we've got to break trail here, and it's not easy, And you get ridicule, you get a lot of ridicule, you get a lot of opposition, you get people call you crazy, and you just got to keep at it. And my father did that with fire. He I learned from him that these fire exclusion policies, especially in the western United States, is not fire that's just causing these massive destructive fires. It's suppression of natural light fires that burn the forest clean without hurting the trees, that build up this huge accumulation of fuel that then when fire does get in it, either lightning or man, the whole thing blows up and it becomes unstoppable. And my father got a lot of resistance to this from the U.S. Forest Service and whatever back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s as he pushed to get light fire back in the environment, and that the problem wasn't fire. And he was ridiculed, and he was attacked, and that's just part of the part of what you've got to go through. We can. Gandhi is an inspiration. Look what Gandhi was. Just one person like Gandhi was able to achieve by just being dedicated and keeping at it, and not giving up, and not becoming angry and violent.
Exactly. Yeah, you definitely hit it there. I think that the whole internet thing is definitely, I hadn't really thought about that. I've thought about the internet as being a big factor in our communications and the way we're able to, the truth is out there if we look for it. At least that aspect of the internet is definitely there. But there's so much crap out there on the internet too.
Yeah, so that comes a problem. If you want to take down an organization, if you want to take down an autocratic organization, you take out its leaders. But if you want to take down a network, you just flood it with trash. And so we've got to be really aware. We've got to become more discriminating. We can't get in our own little societies separate from other little societies, internet societies. We've got to reach out to people with opinions different than ours and communicate in a civilized, loving manner. And it's essentially each of us are voting every moment of our day as to what kind of society we're going to have now and in the future by how we're treating each other. And if we're treating each other so badly, we don't deserve to move into a society where everybody loves and cares and takes care of each other and whatever, and where people don't have to work. They can concentrate not on basic survival needs. They can concentrate on moving the evolution of the society forward, not on manufacturing products and buying and selling, is where everybody's trapped today.
I guess that's you mentioned, just keeping at it. I mean, we got to keep moving forward and not worry about those people who are calling us crazy and stuff. I mean, we have these big, these big groups, actually small groups, these elite that are pulling the strings here, and the only way I see us ever being able to get past what we have in front of us is to do just that, to be persistent and to be consistent with our messages, with what we know, and continue to share truth, and eventually, even those big, or what we see as these big obstacles, this control structure that's here on this planet, it's got to crumble eventually if we keep.
Yeah, well, like what I tell the elite is, do you want to be the kings and queens of the dung heap, or do you want to have a great feast with everybody else on an equal level? So I mean, they're doing themselves in too, because they're trying to be the kings and queens of the dung pile, and so they're still part of the dung pile, so they're not going to evolve either. So I would rather, be on an equal footing and sit around a table and have a great feast, than to fight over scraps and over crap, and trash, and trying to, and control in that kind of environment. And so it's up to them too. They're part of the human race too, and they've got to give up learn to, give up some of their control, because they're very fearful. The reason they're so controlling is that they're very fearful themselves, So the way our society is set up right now, the meanest and the toughest and the meanest and the brightest rise to the top, and then they have to be tough and mean, or another group will come up and overthrow them. And
right.
So we've got to change the whole society, which really kind of got me thinking, into how we should organize it. A society should be organized, and the way that this little Amy Child of Star says is that their society is organized around supercomputers. The quantum computers that within the society actually determine and operate all the infrastructure for the society and everything, and it allows the individuals to go about their own investigations, their own personal growth, and the growth of their humanities and whatever, without getting tied down by just basic survival needs. Food and housing and that sort of thing and whatever. You get their societies are able to move beyond that. When that's all taken care of by robots and by machines and other technology. So the people are then freed up to live their own lives, and to pursue their own spiritual paths. And we can get there. We can do that, and that's what some of the more advanced ethical races are showing us. They're showing us a bright future, whereas the less ethical races are showing, us what the very bad future we have in store for ourselves. And all these technologies and stuff that are coming out, this whole internet thing, is basically we'll have quantum computers and a quantum internet, in which we can communicate clean across the universe, instantaneously. Time and space is no problem and whatever, and that's how these other societies are operating and communicating. So our internet is just still a very primitive nervous system for humanity, and we need to start thinking of, like our how is our body organized? Well, we have billions of cells in our body, but the cells all get along, they all get fed, waste products get taken out, and they allow us, all the cells together, which makes up our consciousness, to deal with, day-to-day affairs and whatever. But this is all being handled subconsciously by supercomputers and by quantum computers, probably within the own cells of our body. So we've got, I don't know, what do we got, 9 billion people or whatever. If we hook them all up in the internet, just like cells in our body, and where they all become organized and help each other, whatever, you develop a single kind of consciousness that's made up of all of our individual consciousness, same way as our bodies are made up, and all the different individual parts of our bodies are taken care of and fed and kept warm and kept at the right temperature, and the waste products are removed and everything else. Well, that's the kind of society we want to evolve for ourselves, not this top-down autocratic society where, if the right hand gets fat and so the left hand falls off, because it's starved to death, that's, we wouldn't live very long if our bodies were organized the same way that our society is organized today.
Yeah, I wonder what the evolution to that process, to that what was described by that in that book. Wonder what the evolution to that stage looked like. I mean, because right now there's a tremendous amount of there's that fear factor out there of control. Something controlling me and giving away my control. Giving away my own sovereignty. If I allow this quantum computer to, take care of do these things for me, is it then controlling my life?
That is basically, so it's not really the quantum computer, just like a gun. It's not the guns that are killing people; it's the people that are pulling the triggers on the guns. And so it's the same way for our technology. It's how you use that technology. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The technology can take over and take care of all our survival needs, so that we can then concentrate on more advanced research and investigations, both as individuals and as a society.
Yeah. And that's part of that question came out of part of the poison that's been injected into society, to especially into this genre is are we giving our control away? Would that idea be giving our control away? I see exactly where you're coming from, and I definitely see the value there. And I think it would all have to do with the way it's set up and the way it is put together on a consensual basis, in a consensual and unified basis.
You got to remember that a cloud is made up of individual rain droplets, and how those individual rain droplets interact with each other determines the type of cloud that you have, whether it's a thunder cloud or whether it's a cirrus cloud, or the type of clouds is determined on how the particles are interacting with each other. And so what's happening is nature is just building with us as single cells, building a more advanced individual. Just like all these cells in our bodies all together, have created us. So the same thing is all of uses, billions of uses, all interconnected through telecommunications and quantum internet and whatever, actually become like a single individual. And then that single individual interacts with other super society individuals. So some of these societies are interacting almost like an individual. All the little individual people within the society all get their needs taken care of and everything, but they're so interconnected that you develop a kind of a group consciousnness or an individual consciousness. And so nature is just taking this up to the next level and doing exactly the same thing that it's doing with our bodies, but on a much more advanced level. And so either we get it, at one time there were just single organisms running around and single organisms eating other little single organisms, and then the sponges, started getting together and building structures, and the jellyfish, and even more complex cells got together and organized. But just even today in our bodies, we have 2.5 pounds of bacteria just in our guts that digest our food, single-celled bacteria and viruses and all kinds of microorganisms that are digesting the food in our guts. And so these single-cell organisms, independent little single-cell organisms, are still around, and they're flourishing in our guts, where at one time they used to flourish in the oceans, acidic oceans of methane and whatever. Well, that's all still going on in our guts. And so we really haven't lost anything. We haven't really lost anything. It's just that some cells have found it better to get organized and come together as bodies in order to compete for resources as to stay single-celled organisms. And the same way with civilizations. Our civilization is evolving to become, sort of a one individual kind of a civilization where a conscious mind develops from all the little independent minds which is composed. All being held together and operated through quantum supercomputers and whatever it is, which is where we're heading, very rapidly now. One of the things I think that these extraterrestrials, the ones that live for 800 to 1,000 years, have is how fast we are evolving. The tall whites used to sit out on the mountainsides, and they watched the wagon trains roll in to the Las Vegas area into where the area where their base was, and one of them even was telling Charles Hall about that they were around. This one individual was around when Madison was president. And so just look at where we've come in the last 100, 200 years, from wagons, to spaceships.
Right.
And so we're kind of like the fruit flies of the galaxy. I think maybe our lifespan spans have been suppressed, like indicated in the Bible, that it was cut to 10% of what we used to live before the flood.
Right.
That maybe extraterrestrials may have manipulated our genetics in order to shorten our lifespans, but then on the other hand, a shortened lifespan it allows you to become much more adaptable, and that partially compensates for the shortness of our lifespans, is our ability to mutate, just like fruit flies do, because their lifespans are so short.
Right.
And so we're doing amazing things. If you look at this from an extraterrestrial perspective, we're advancing at an amazing rate, and we're compensating for our shorter lifespans by our adaptability. But very soon, we could very well be able to know enough to expand our lifespans back to 900 or 1,000 years, which would put us in the league of a lot of these extraterrestrial races. And we're pretty close to that right now. If we don't either destroy ourselves or we don't get taken over by a less ethical race. So we really have a bright future ahead of ourselves if we're willing to take it. And that's essentially what Corso was told by an extraterrestrial he met in a mine, and actually helped the spaceship leave without being shot at or whatever. And the ET told him, he says, Corso asked, what's in it for us? And he said, your future, if you're willing to take it.
There you go. We're at our last break, Ed. Good stuff, guys. We will see you after the break. The 100th Monkey Radio on the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
On your way through this hard venture, you will be tested.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
So Ed, we're in our last segment here, and I kind of like to touch on some of the things that are going on now in the world, and some of the sightings that have happened here recently. Are there any sightings that have happened that are have substance in your world that you'd like to share with us?
They're happening all the time. I just every day I'm usually on a couple of hours on Facebook posting sightings to my, sightings and contact cases to my wall. I think there was something in Pennsylvania. I just don't really even read the articles so much, so as long as they are coming from a credible, fairly credible source like Marsh, who works with MUFON. These sightings are happening all the time. They're happening all over the world. They're happening in just about everybody's backyard. One of the things that I found out is that I built my own. Once I realized this is first I realized it wasn't a scientific problem because politics was interfering with the science by distorting the data, and then so you needed political solutions, as well as scientific solutions. And then I realized it was an intelligence problem because this is a playground for intelligence agencies. And so I studied intelligence gathering and analysis, and I started building up. I wrote an article or two in the local newspapers, did some letters to the editor, and people began to understand that I was interested in the subject. And within my local area here in the Grady County area, just north of Tallahassee, Florida, within about 50 miles. And at one time, I was having 2 sightings a week being reported in my local area. And then I followed those sightings back, collateral sightings back to sources, and I found that they were actually contact people or in contact with extraterrestrials in my own neighborhood. And it was, something that they didn't want to talk about to anybody that they didn't trust, because they were afraid it'd get out in the press and then it'd be picked up by the intelligence community, and then they would become in danger, and also their extraterrestrials could be subject to being ambushed or shot down or whatever. And so there were the Nordic types. There were 2 brothers that were operating or studying animals, and there were 2 sisters, Nordic sisters, that were involved in studying plants in my local area. And then there were also this little group of short humans that were a lot shorter than we are and kind of barrel-chested. And they were kind of more or less kind of like a limited thing, kind of like on academic research missions that within this local area, and they were affiliated with other types of extraterrestrials. So I got a lot of experience by putting together my own intelligence gathering network, even in my local area. So I realized this wasn't just happening, down in some hot spot or whatever. It was getting a lot of media attention. This was going on everywhere, in everybody's backyard. That these extraterrestrials were monitoring. They were taking water samples, testing for pollution, environmental damage, updating. A lot of it's got to do with, like we have Google Earth and Google Mars and all that now. Well, they have something similar but much more advanced, I think, which they update their databases and make sure that their technology is calibrated properly and whatever, and so that everything that's going on this planet is being recorded like in this huge database. So it's like you can go back and Google Earth, but you can go back and go right back down 20 years ago to a little fiddler crab that's on the beach down here on Dickerson Bay, and study that individual fiddler crab and what it was going through 20 years ago. It's all being recorded in these huge databases and whatever. So it takes a certain amount of manpower, so to speak, to keep an eye on the technology. And so and a lot of times, you'll see the only way I can keep up, with what's going on, now is like on Facebook, like every day. It used to be when I first got in the field way back in the 1970s, you could read a few books and keep up on the subject. But now so much is happening that you just monitor what's going across every day, and what I try to do is sort out for people the trash, the scams, the scammers, the hoaxsters. The viral marketers are really bad now. They create all these alien body hoax and also these hoax of up close pictures of spacecraft and that sort of thing. And so I weed all that out, and I try to keep up with the credible cases that are happening. I think I just saw yesterday or today that there was, in the last 3 months, MUFON had 350-something or like that sightings reported within a certain region or within the United States, and some people can just go to those they can just type in MUFON and get into those databases if they want to monitor what people are reporting on a daily basis. Triangular craft. I saw triangular crafts. I saw, globes. I saw, I see this stuff all the time. What really interests me, though, is the occupants, and so I tend to concentrate on occupant cases and deal with those. Actually, one guy, Albert Rosales, has over 14,000 occupant cases that he's cataloged since way back in the 1940s and maybe even a little earlier. So it's not like there's not any data, there's not any evidence out there. There's tens of thousands of contact cases where people claim face-to-face of extraterrestrials, and there's millions of sightings, probably hundreds of thousands of abductee cases or more. And it's going on all the time, and the problem is like you had said before, is sorting out what's real and what's not. And the people that come into the field, unfortunately, are probably going to be taken in by a scammer pretty quick unless they get to some good, credible information. And that's why with my book, what I've tried to do is I have 169, I think it's 169 links to the credible source material within the book, to the contact testimony, to the witness whistleblower testimony. People like Ben Rich, who was head of Lockheed's Skunk Works, who said that we have the technology now to take ET home and that we got this from extraterrestrials. You know, this is just not some ordinary Joe just make something up in his mind. You know, this was Ben Rich, head of Lockheed Skunk Works, you know,
Right.
you know, when it was back in the 80s, you know, and whatever. So people can monitor this on the internet in a lot of these groups. You see it. The problem, like I said, is just being able to sort it out, and that's what I try to do. Even on our Extraterrestrial Cultural Center site, you know, I try to post good material, and we allow a certain amount of other people posting stuff that's not that credible, and always kind of fighting with the other two moderators to keep too much of this other trash from trashing up our site and drowning out the credible material.
Right.
So it's a real struggle, but that's the only way you can stay on top. You can really stay on top of things and what's going on at any particular time anywhere in the world.
Yeah, you know, one wild card out there that I think could have a tremendous impact on changing the planet is those garage inventors. You know, and whether, you know, regardless of where they're getting these insights and these ideas from, which I think, you know, some of it could be from extraterrestrial or even from a spiritual nature, that these ideas are coming through to them. But there's some people out there that have got this free energy thing done. It's done.
Well, that in spite of all the suppression of this so-called free energy or non-polluting energy sources, there's, you know, in spite of all the suppression, you know, what suppression usually does is it breaks things into little pieces, you know, and then the pieces kind of have to reorganize themselves together and overcome the suppression. And so people are doing that, and people are getting around the controls, and some of these technologies are not all that complicated, and so it is, things are changing for the better. You know, we're getting, you know, this kind of stuff, information is coming out, and so I'm optimistic about it. I'm generally optimistic about humanity. You know, I realize we're in a difficult state, and a lot more suffering is necessary, but that's what it takes for people to wake up. People just don't wake up when they're comfortable. They wake up when they're suffering, and they begin to question, you know, their lives and what they're doing in their lives when they're suffering. When things are going along fine, then they just sort of slack off on their self-understanding, and until they get caught up and start to suffer, then they really have to start to figure out what's going on in their lives, and maybe they're thinking along the wrong lines. Maybe they need to change their thinking. Maybe they need to change their belief systems. You know, so they push them into an existential crisis. You know, and an existential crisis, you know, it really shakes you up right down to your core, and you end up being somebody that completely different than what you were before.
You just described me to the T. I took that proverbial 2x4 upside the head in the middle '80s, and my life's never been the same.
Yeah, what happened to me in the early '70s was starting when I was about 17 to I was 23. You know, I was cast down into the depths of depression, and at a certain point, I just laid down in a cabin up in Alaska and said, "This is all there is to life. Is I just want to die." And I went deep down into myself, and like three beings that I can only describe as like two drops in the morning, you know, gave me this thought form that said, you know, your path is truth, your vehicle is honesty, and the fuel for your vehicle is love, but like in a thought form. And then from that, I knew there was so much more to the universe. It's just up to me to start cleaning up my act, start practicing good mental and emotional hygiene, and to live a simple life so that I could concentrate on figuring out what the heck life was about. And I learned, one of the things I learned from Alaska was that you can live in a small cabin, a 12 by 12 foot cabin, very comfortably and simply with very little expense. And so that's what I've done with the rest of my life. So my life's my own. I haven't been owned by any corporation. I'm not anybody's wage slave, but my life is my own. And so I'd be able to have the time to figure all this stuff out. And I've tried tried to put it together in a book form that's now free as far as the extraterrestrial contact material and whatever, so that other people can benefit from my knowledge and can build on what I have learned, just like I've built on the knowledge of hundreds and thousands of other people that have written books and material that I read and whatnot. So that's just I'm going to do the same thing with fire, and maybe the same thing with the soul book or the enlightenment book. And I'm over 65 years of age now. My parents started having quite a few troubles, in the early 70s and whatever. So I want to get all my knowledge compressed and into at least 3 of these books before I start slipping and whatever. So the first one's out. I've kind of got the second one written, and then I'm also, working some on this third one. And and it's very important to to make them free as soon as possible, and that's what I did after about a year and a half. I just went and did a web page, had a web page done up with my book, and so that people can read it off the web page, or they can download it as a PDF file and read it. And I've got in the last several months since there's like 13,000, I think 500 people have hit on that site, which doesn't mean all those people have seen it or read the whole book, but hundreds of people every month are getting onto my book, and it's helping people get a handle on what's going on before they get trashed or get discouraged because of these scammers and these vile marketers and whatever that so clutter up and confuse the whole extraterrestrial reality thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Kudos to you on putting that out there and making that access free. That's so important right now too.
Well, you got to put your you got to put your money, so to speak, where your mouth is. I mean, if you want a world in which all information and which all resources are free, well, you got to start making the sacrifices so that those resources are free. So you have to start walking the walk, not just talking the talk. You got a lot of people talking the talk who live extravagant lifestyles, or even just lifestyles, where they spend more in one day than what I spend, the $500 a month or so that I spend to live every month. So if you really want to protect the environment and you really want a better world, well, you've got to really downsize yourself so that you don't take up so many resources, so it leaves resources for other people, and also to make, even though it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of effort to write a book and whatever to get this information out to people, but if 10,000 or 20, 30,000 people are going to benefit, that's better for me than making $1,000 bucks, on $1,000 on a book, and there's no real way most people are going to recover, what they put into a book anyway. Right.
Well, we're investing in our futures, right?
Yeah, and our children. We got to invest in our future, invest in our children, because we're going to be reborn back into it again.
Exactly.
Until we get it right. So it's up to us every moment to operate in a positive, beneficial manner for ourselves and for humanity, for our own sake as well as for the sake of others, because we're all interconnected, and we're going to be born right back into the mess that we're making right now, or going back into the more advanced society that we're creating for ourselves right now. And a lot of it's got to be based on lifestyle. I mean, you can't have a lifestyle that takes a lot of resources and it keeps you working your tail off every day. You can't get it's pretty difficult to get very spiritual, when you're being yelled and screamed at work, or, you come home, upset about something that, that happened, wherever you don't have time for your family or for your children or whatever. That kind of lifestyle is not, it's got to change. If you're going to become a spiritually advanced person, an enlightened person, you really got to simplify your life, and you got to live a lifestyle that's easily sustainable without this constant fear of where's the next month's rent going to come from, or how am I going to feed my children, sort of thing. And that's, like I say, one of the things that I learned is you can easily live in a little tiny home or a little place for a very small amount of money, so you don't have to work that much to pay for the house or pay for your food. So it leaves you free to meditate and to study and read and work on your own spiritual evolution. But it's a lifestyle thing, that's putting your putting your to action and rather than just talking the talk, you're actually walking the walk. You're using diminished amounts of resources, and you're taking more of those resources and putting them back in and helping the rest of humanity for your own future and for humanity's future.
Yeah, definitely. That's some good stuff. So what's on? I know you're working on a couple more books. What's going on with the extraterrestrial cultural centers? I know you were, last time we talked, you were looking for some people to take on some roles there and help to move this forward. How are things progressing there?
Well, it's slow. People talk a lot about they're willing to help or whatever. When it gets right down to doing the work that's necessary, people seem to disappear. So basically, what I see as my role is just to make sure that people hear about the concept and that people that know how to organize and in the management can make management decisions and know how to work with resources and whatever can take it from here. My job is more of a conceptualizer, and so I try to conceptualize the whole thing. And what I'm kind of looking for is people that would to contact me that would get involved in, especially in management, that can take this thing and make this thing happen. Action people or whatever. So it's going to happen sooner or later. So I'm concentrating in other areas and just letting things grow. And like I say, our membership's over 2,000 now on Facebook. And I was talking to a guy that has a group that has 10,000 members. He said it really accelerates fast after about 2,000 because Facebook starts really helping you by making using your group as a suggested group, and so we can see that happen with ours. Is we're accelerating the size, and so the more people we get, 10, 15, 20,000, 30,000 people on that Facebook group, there's going to be a few people that are willing to walk the walk and see how important this is for the future of our society, and we'll start setting up these extraterrestrial centers, all over the planet in order to interact, and teach people about the extraterrestrials, but at the same time also interact with the extraterrestrials themselves.
Right.
And so it's an advanced concept. It's our future, but now's the time to start setting up the infrastructure for this for advanced ethical contact with the more advanced races and whatever. And it's sort of built upon the concepts and the evidence that's in my book. And again, anybody can go to your site and access the book, or they can just go to my blog exopolitics.blogspot.com / or UFOs: A Comprehensive Briefing, and both the extraterrestrial cultural website is there, a link, and also the link to my book. Or they can go onto Facebook and just look up Extraterrestrial Cultural Center and join us on Facebook, or follow me, even though they can't friend me now very easily. They can follow me, the daily UFO material that I post to my wall, as well as geopolitical information or whatever. I spend a couple hours a day. That they can still follow that on under my name, Ed Komarek, spelled Komarek.
Okay. So out of all the races that are interacting with us right now on this planet, I know that there's definitely some that are very benevolent and are there for us. They're helping us out the best that they can under the strictures that they have to operate. Is there a from out of everything that you've researched and experienced, is there, people have talked about these federations, the Galactic Federation of blah blah blah, or whatever. Have any of those come to your attention that appear to be at least more genuine, or a little bit more to them than some of the others?
Yeah, that starts getting tough because people's imaginations start really running wild, and also people are just really good at deceiving themselves. It's all based upon being truthful, and I think like I saw in one of your ads here, whatever, of telling the truth all the time. You got to tell the truth not only to others, you got to tell the truth to yourself, because every time you lie, you undermine not only other people but you undermine yourself. And the more you tell the truth, the more you're able to see the truth. But if a liar can be sitting on the truth and never even know it's the truth, he'll think it's a lie. And so what's the tough thing is you got to build out on evidence. And what I try to do is I use remote viewing in order to gather information, but I only use it so far. I use it to find new information. It's kind of like putting planks out on quicksand. And some people use remote viewing and they just go completely out of touch with reality. But what I do is I use it to find the next plank and the next plank and the next plank. So I got a very substantial foundation on the tall whites, pretty good on the Nordics, quite a bit, a lot on the grays. And you can see that there's an alliance apparently between the grays, and this praying mantis type or insect type, because abductees have seen them and whatever, but they seem to be under control of some of the grays, whatever. But there's a lot of different grays, so that gets tricky. So people are just jumping to conclusions on these federations and whatever. But obviously, that they're all organized, like local people say that the Nordics were fighting with a reptilian race at one time a few years ago or whatever that had overpopulated this planet, and they were kind of intruding too much onto this planet, and they were having to kind of being beat back a little bit, and whatever. So, and I was told by my contactee friends that the small human types, were in alliance with the Nordics, and the Nordics were in alliance with another humanoid type that had apparently been captured and was being tortured and interrogated in the western United States. Was the reason I actually saw their craft in the first place, because they were so upset about all that was going down that they allowed me to see their craft that night and whatever. So there are these alliances and whatever, but we're having a tough enough time right now just understanding the individuals and individual cultures. And the tall white culture, thanks to Charles Hall, we developed a fairly good understanding. They're autocratic like we are. Their base is more of a stopover, a pit stop for going elsewhere. That's for maintenance of their ships and that sort of thing. And so they're not overly involved with us like the Greys are involved with us. The Nordics are very involved here. Our military is chasing them with jets all the time. I even witnessed this near Moultrie, Georgia, and with the jets were buzzing around like a bunch of bees up in the sky, and the UFO just flashed on to let us know it was there. And these were the Nordic types, and because these Nordics are not cooperating with our government like the Greys are doing, they're being attacked whenever possible by our military. And so their technology is good enough as you don't usually get caught or get shot down or whatever. And I've seen the videos of a friend of mine took up their craft and talked to the couple of the contactees of the Nordics there, and realized they're part of a culture. One of the Nordics women got injured in a battle with the reptilians and whatever, but she ended up being okay. But this kind of stuff is going on, all the time, and we're just all, basically oblivious to it, kind of like a bunch of ants in an ant bed. Unless the cow steps on the ant beds, we're pretty much just going about our business like the ants go about their business, whatever.
Right.
But it's our overall reality that we're growing into, which then is part of this much greater reality that we're just discussing about reincarnation, out-of-body experiences, and near-death experiences, and all that. So we live in a vast, complex universe.
It is a big picture, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the links just came up on my site is that basically the scientists are discussing whether there's evidence that that our universe is basically a quantum computer. And that's an interesting scientific discussion on that and possible evidence of that. And of course I put I click and post and share to my wall that one.
That'll be one to look into. Ed, we got just a minute left, and I just want to thank you so much for joining me. And wow, this is a big picture, and it's not as cut and dried as so many people try to make it.
Yeah, that's why I just tried to walk people through. I tried to step by step in the book or whatever, and I kind of coherent, fairly well edited format. And so I hope it's helpful to people.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, and I want to thank everybody for listening. And
thank you,
Ramon. Hey, we'll see you next week, Ramon. Condemnation without investigation is a height of ignorance, and for Ramon, the love you deny is the pain you carry. Thanks a lot, guys.